So if you're removing more clear coat to protect the clear coat, that doesn't make sense. That's counterintuitive. Okay, so what's the difference between a paint enhancement and a paint correction? So when we're talking about a paint correction, usually it takes multiple steps and it starts with a cutting compound and a cutting pad, and then you finish with a polish fluid and a polishing or finishing pad. And the objective of a paint correction is to try to remove as many imperfections from the paint. So you're trying to, in a way, perfect the paint as much as possible. That's your objective. A paint enhancement, on the other hand, is usually one step. And you're gonna choose your pad of choice and a polishing or finishing fluid, not a compound, and you're only gonna do that one pass. And however many imperfections you remove with that one pass, that's all you're gonna do. You're not gonna chase after all the imperfections. You're not gonna do multiple passes. So however much you remove on that first pass, that's what you're gonna offer. So you're just trying to, as the name states it, enhance the paint. You're gonna improve the clarity. You're gonna remove a lot of the scratches, but not all of them. And you're not gonna chase after all of them. Okay, so first we're gonna do a paint enhancement on this door. We're gonna use DIY Details wool pad, and we're gonna use their gold standard polish. So this should be able to reach us a good amount of cut and a good finish as well. So we're gonna spin the pad a little bit, and then one spray. And then we're gonna start here at the top. We're gonna use speed 4. Okay, so after a pass with the wool pad and the gold standard polish, I can see a ton of clarity compared to before. And I hope that you can see that through the camera as well. There's a lot more gloss, there's a lot more clarity, but I can absolutely still see micro scratches and swirls. So I would say that it removed about 70 to 75% of the imperfections that were on this panel with the one-step pass and the wool pad. Hopefully you can tell the difference as I can. Now, depending on the type of service that you promised your client or that you guys agreed to, that will depend whether or not this is good enough. In most circumstances, this is more than good enough. This would categorize as a paint enhancement. We removed a lot of scratches, a lot of sore marks. We made the paint a lot clearer and very glossy. So it's ready to be coated, but it all depends on what you promise your client, or if you're working on your personal vehicle, if that's good enough for you. Now, some people will say, no, that's not good enough. The paint should be perfect before you put a ceramic coating because you're gonna lock it in for many years, so on and so forth. But the reality is, that's not necessarily true. Again, it all depends on what your client is paying you for, what your client agreed, and what you see as a professional detailer is not necessarily what the client sees. The client is just gonna see, wow, the paint looks 1,000 times better and it's so shiny. Versus you, under a light, looking at it every angle, yeah, you're gonna see more sore marks because you're looking for them. But for the client, that may be more than enough. So one thing I wanna highly emphasize is, don't be misguided by what others online have to say. Your client is the one that's paying you, not the detailer across the world or the detailer behind a keyboard or some weekend warrior on the keyboard. They're not paying your bills. What is your client looking for? What did you promise your client? What did you agree with your client? Those are the things that matters, not what other people online are saying. Now, if you're doing it for your personal vehicles, then that's a different story, right? How much do you want to perfect the paint? But here's a fallacy. Some people say the paint has to be perfect before you can coat it. That's not necessarily true. Let's think about why we're gonna put a coating. Aren't we putting a coating to protect the paint? Aren't we putting a coating because clear coats are very thin nowadays? Yes, that's the reason why we're putting a coating. We're putting a coating to protect the paint because it's very thin and because of all the sun damage that it's gonna get. But if you think about it, what is polishing or what is cutting? What is compound? We're removing clear coat. That's what we're doing. We're using abrasives to remove paint, to remove clear coat. So if you perfect the paint, doesn't that mean you're removing more clear coat? Yeah, you're gonna remove a lot more clear coat. So if you're removing more clear coat to protect the clear coat, isn't that an oxymoron? That doesn't make sense. That's counterintuitive. So that's why it's not necessarily true that you have to perfect the paint because you're gonna seal it in for many years, because by doing that, you're taking away more clear coat. So instead, if you do a paint enhancement, you remove a lot of the sore marks, even though there will be some left behind, but overall, the paint's gonna look clearer, it's gonna look more glossy, there's gonna be very little sore marks, and you're not removing as much clear coat. That's the win-win situation right there. And the client is gonna be pleased. The client already remembers how the paint looked in the past, right? Dull, not shiny, a lot of sore marks. So you're already making it look better. Now, to each his own, right? Everybody has their own philosophies, but I do want to provide more context so people make the right educated decisions when doing paint enhancements or paint correction. If your number one purpose is to protect the paint, then removing more clear coat is not the answer. Your number one mission should be to preserve as much clear coat as possible. And that does mean you're gonna have to leave some scratches behind. That's totally fine. People are not gonna be looking at their cars with a dedicated light at all the angles and, oh, look here, you cannot drive the car because it has a scratch there. How could you drive your car like that, man? What are you? People are not like that. That's not reality. So it really kind of sometimes makes me laugh when I see people online having this ego where, no, it has to be perfect and you're a hack if it's not perfect. That's not true. So again, to each his own. Everybody has their own philosophy, but you should be well educated about this matter. Okay, so as I mentioned, on this panel, we're gonna do paint correction. We're gonna start by using a microfiber cutting pad with compound, and then we're gonna finish it with a polishing pad and finishing fluid. The different colors of paint show scratches differently. So for example, a black paint shows every scratch. It's very easy to notice the scratches against the reflection of the sun or when you put a light to it. But lighter colors like white or silver or metallic or gray, kind of like these colors, then they're a little bit harder to tell, which can be a benefit because that also means if there is a lot, when you drive it, you don't see it as much. But basically, dark colored paints show scratches more easily. First, we're gonna start by, again, cutting here. The paint has little, like, I don't even know what to call it, little dots. It just lost its clarity. It definitely has a lot of sore marks from, or just love marks from washing. And so we're gonna start with our cutting face, and then we're gonna move on to our finishing face. So we like speed 4 for us. Okay, so if this was a paint enhancement, that one step is all I would do. Since our goal and objective is just to enhance the paint, however many imperfections or sore marks it removed with that one step, I'm going to be satisfied and I'm gonna move on to the next panel. Because again, we're just trying to enhance the paint. We are trying to add clarity. We're trying to add gloss by removing some oxidation and imperfections. But since this is a paint correction, I'm gonna inspect the paint and see if I need to do a second or even a third pass, however many passes it takes for me to try to perfect the paint as much as possible. So I'm gonna inspect and decide where I may need to do a second pass if I want to, and then proceed with my polishing step to refine the paint from the haze caused by the cutting compound and the cutting pad. Now there's many variables you have to consider. For example, the type of clear coat that you're working with. So some clear coats are softer and some clear coats are harder. Clear coats that are considered soft, they scratch very easily, but they also polish very easily. So you can scratch it very easily, but you can also remove the defects very easily. So that's a soft clear coat. But other clear coats, harder clear coats, they're a little bit harder to scratch, but they're also harder to polish. So it takes more aggressive methods and you may need to do multiple steps. So in a paint correction, you don't necessarily always have to do like a cutting and a polishing. You may just do multiple steps with a polishing pad if it's a very soft paint. So there's no end all be all, it's just different variables that you have to play. So I'm just speaking in generals here. Now, as I inspected this panel, I do see that there's still some swirl marks and scratches that I want to remove. So I'm going to go ahead and do a second pass in some of these areas, and then I'm going to go ahead and finish it off with the polishing step. So I recommend you clean your pad after every panel. So I did this whole panel here. So now I'm going to use my pad washer to clean my pad before I continue. And then another thing that I like to do is, because most of the panel, it's okay. There's just some isolated areas that I may want to go over a second time. What I like to do is when I put my compound, right, we're gonna put some, basically I'm going to kind of dab the product where I want to emphasize a little more. That way I put more emphasis in that area. Even though I'm gonna polish the whole thing, but these are the areas that I want to start and emphasize, kind of like spot treat, I guess you can say. So this is the technique that I like to use sometimes. I don't always do this, but most of the time I like doing this. That way I don't spend my time polishing areas that don't need it because it's already fine. But other areas where I still see some scratches, I use the compound to kind of mark it for me so I know where to put the emphasis. So that's something that you can do, and it's a tip that can help you. Okay, so after inspecting the paint and doing my second pass, I removed pretty much most, there's like 2 or 3 minor imperfections here and there. So if I really wanted to go after it and perfect the paint, I would do another pass. But in this case, that's enough for me. I want to preserve the clear coat as much as possible. And they're just very isolated. Again, it's like 2 minor things that I can barely see when I put a light to it. So you can't really tell if you just look at it. Just looking at it though, it improved the clarity so much. You can just tell visually by looking at it without the light. The paint feels so much better. It's a lot more smooth. So if I was really trying to perfect, even though there's no perfection, but if I was really trying to go after everything, I may do another pass. But personally, I like to preserve the clear coat. So this is more than good for me. It is ready to go to the polishing, just to give it that final finish, that clarity, remove some of the haze from the cutting compound and pad, and get it ready for a coating. Okay, so for our finishing step, we're gonna use DIY Details Gold Standard pad and their polish. So we're gonna use a little bit of rinseless solution, get the pad nice and moist, dampened. And then we're gonna just do one sprit here, spin the pad a little bit. And then we're gonna go ahead and finish it off. All right, so this is the after shot, and I hope you can tell through the camera the amount of clarity there is, the difference in clarity and finish, and there's little to none of the imperfections, the micro scratches, the swirl marks. There's a lot more clarity and the color of the paint just pops a lot more. So overall, greatly satisfied with the result, and I hope that you can tell the difference on camera. All right, so we just finished polishing this panel using DIY Details pad and fluid, and it looks great. The paint really pops, the gloss really pops. So basically, now we can move on to a next panel or next area. Now, I do want to emphasize that each situation is unique and it has its own challenges. So this is not an end-all be-all, but this is the general idea between a paint correction, which is what we did here, a 2-step or 3-step with compound and polish, versus a paint enhancement, which is just one pad, one pass, and just a polishing fluid. So there's a lot of factors to consider in your situation, but these are some of the main points that differentiate a paint correction and a paint enhancement. So I want to talk a little bit about the different pads and fluids that you can use for both. Now when it comes to a paint correction, so a paint correction, you're going to use a cutting pad. So you can use a microfiber like this blue one here from Rupes. You can use this wool one, which is also from Rupes. It's a cutting one. Or you can use a foam pad. So you have this one from Lake Country, or you have this one from Rupes as well. We also have here DIY Details wool pad. This wool pad from DIY Detail is also a cutting pad. So you're gonna take a cutting pad and a compound. So a compound is basically a more aggressive fluid. It's gonna remove a lot more scratches than a polish. So the one I like and recommend is the Last Cut Plus or the Last Cut. These were designed by a mobile detailer, so they're sun friendly. So the other thing that I like about them is that they don't produce a lot of dust and they have a great cut. So you're gonna use a compound and a cutting pad for your first step. And you can do multiple steps with these combo, but usually depending on the color, for example, if you're working on black paint, this will leave a little bit of a haze behind if the clear coat is very soft. So after you remove as many scratches as possible, you're gonna follow it with the polishing step. So you're gonna take a polishing pad. So there's a couple different ones as well here. You have this yellow one that is a microfiber from Rupes. You have this wool one, which is also a microfiber, that's also from Rupes. And you have this foam ones. So this one's from Rupes, and then this one's from DIY Detail. So these pads right here are polishing pads. So they're more for finishing the paint. And then you can have your polishing fluid. So we have, for example, DIY Details Gold Standard Polish, or a very good one as well is Sonak's Perfect Finish. So these two are great finishing, polishing fluids. You can also use 3D1. 3D1 is a great product because it's a hybrid. In a way, both of these can work as a hybrid in the sense that they're pad dependent. So depending on the type of pad you use them with, it's gonna give you either a cut, more of a cut, or more of a finish. So for example, if you use a cutting pad, like a microfiber cutting pad, it's gonna cut. But you can also use a polishing pad and it's gonna give you a good finish. Same thing with DIY Details, but 3D1 absolutely has a lot more cut. So if you're trying to do a paint correction, then this is a great product you would wanna choose. So these are some of the combinations that you can use for a paint correction. Now, when we talk about a paint enhancement, basically, we're not gonna use a compound, we're gonna use the polish because we're only gonna do one step. So we wanna choose something that's gonna remove as much defects as possible while at the same time give us the best finish possible. So for that, we're gonna either use 3D1 or DIY Details Gold Standard Polish. Now, where Gold Standard Polish shines a lot is that it doesn't stain the trim, the rubber trim or the plastic trim around windows and seals. So when you use this product, you don't have to put tape on those areas. You don't have to tape the areas. So this will give you more efficiency and it gives you a very nice finish, but it doesn't have as much cut as something like 3D1. So 3D1 has a greater cut and has a great finish as well. The things that make these two products shine, however, is that they don't dust at all. So Gold Standard Polished, it has a long working time. You can work it in the panel for a long time polish. Same thing with 3D1, and they don't produce dust. Now that's a very important factor, because personally, when working on a vehicle, you spend all this time cleaning the vehicle, right? Before you start polishing. And then if the compound or polish you use produces a lot of dust and it gets all over, especially it always gets in the seams and the cracks of the doors and things like that. So you're gonna have to do another cleaning round after you polish, which to me is counterintuitive and counterproductive. So I will never recommend, and I don't use any compound or polish that dusts a lot. So the Rupes brand produces great pads, and for me personally, they have the best polishers. However, their fluids produce a lot of dust, so I do not like them at all. Even though they may cut or finish well, which they do, but they produce a lot of dust. The only one that doesn't dust is their white product, so that one I do recommend. So if you use a fluid that produces a lot of dust, you're gonna have to clean the car afterwards and then do your panel prep. So in a way, in most cases, you're gonna have to clean anyways, because you're gonna have to follow it with the panel prep if you're gonna put a ceramic coating or a sealant, but you don't wanna deal with all that dust. So I personally don't recommend any product that produces a lot of dust, and these ones right here, they do not produce dust. So that's what I like about them. Now, when we talk about pads, we can see that each of the different fibers of the pads or different materials of the pads have different levels. So for example, when we talk about microfiber, the Rupes microfiber pads, you can see that they have a cut and they have a polish. So you have the yellow and we have the blue one. So even though they're both microfiber, one is more aggressive than the other. Same thing with the wool. When we have wool pads, we have a wool that is for cutting, that is coarse, and a yellow that is for polishing. Also with the DIY details, their wool pad is more of a cutting pad compared to their other pad. And also same thing with foam. With foam, we have these blue cutting pads from Lake Country and Rupes, and we have something like these yellow ones from DIY Detail and Rupes as well. But we also have another tier, which is the white ones. So their white ones is a fine finish. Most companies have their cutting, their polishing, and then their fine finish. Now, whether you're doing paint corrections or paint enhancements, one thing that is for sure, keeping your pads clean regularly is the most beneficial tip that's gonna achieve the best result for you. So a pad washer is something I highly recommend. You can also use compressed air if you're talking about microfiber or wool, but I wouldn't use compressed air on foam because it destroys the foam cells, the tiny little foam cells within the pad. So only for wool or microfiber would I recommend compressed air. But the point is, keep your pads clean often, almost at every pass if possible. That way, you can have the best results. All right, so I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you received a lot of value and learned a couple things. But let me know in the comment section, what's your favorite pad and fluid combo to use in paint correction or paint enhancement? And also I want to know, what type of video would you like to see next? What topic would you like to learn a little bit more about that you would like for me to go a little bit in depth into? Let me know in the comment section. Thank you so much for watching again, guys. Please subscribe because I have a lot of content like this, and hit the like button so other people can see this content as well. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a great day.